Thank you for joining me. My name is Grim, and this is your new haven for all things horror. And today, I'm going to be reviewing the movie Apartment 143. So sit back, grab a snack, and let's get into this. So, Apartment 143 is a paranormal horror movie that is shot in a found footage style where three paranormal investigators visit and stay at Alan's residence with his two kids to find evidence of paranormal activity. Before watching this movie, I didn't expect much from reading Rotten Tomatoes reviews, but the premise to this movie still intrigued me. I also tend to have a soft spot for found footage movies. I just feel like they can enhance how immersed into the story you are. There were a few sequences where the camera work really immersed you into the action with how fast-paced and shaky it was. Like, not too much to be bad, but enough to make it feel real. There were also moments that made me feel like I was watching a movie adaptation of the video game Phasmophobia, or watching a Sam Colby video because of the certain experiments they do and just how it was like shot and made and how the movie was made. We get little hints and teasers behind this family and what they've been through, and it really unravels towards the end, but the payoff is just so satisfying with the explanation and monologue that's performed by Kai Lennox. There are just many things in this movie that I think paranormal enthusiasts will love when it comes to lore and rules set in place for how things work. The suspense, drama, and horror basically rules this movie all throughout. It is what will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very end. Now that's just the non-spoiler part of this video. So now I'm going to get into the deep spoils of this movie. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, I recommend you go watch it and come back to this video, because I'm going to be talking full spoilers right now. So the movie starts off with the three paranormal investigators, cameraman Paul, played by Rick Gonzalez, who I know from Arrow as Wild Dog, so that made me even more interested. We also meet paranormal investigator Dr. Helzer and his assistant, who is referred to as the gatekeeper, Ellen. They are invited to an apartment building by Alan White, played by Kai Lennox, and an unemployed widower who lives in a barely inhabited complex with his 4-year-old Benny and his teenage daughter Caitlin. We learn that they've been experiencing paranormal activity, and even more strange, they've been experiencing the same activity in the old farmhouse before moving to this apartment that they're in. Dr. Helzer starts having Paul set up motion capturing cameras, and this is where I really got invested in Doug's style of film in this movie, as it's both found footage and surveillance footage at the same time. Paul walks around with his own camera to capture mobility, close-ups, and interviews with the White family. We almost immediately start to experience some activity as there's banging from the apartment above, and then Helzer sends Paul to investigate with no footage of his investigation, so it's just assuming there wasn't any found. After that, now we start to get interviews with the family. Specifically, Alan and 4-year-old Benny, since the daughter Caitlin is in that teenage stage where she gives no fucks about this and doesn't want anything to do with her father, period. We learn that shortly after Alan's wife died, they began to experience strange events like the typewriter going by itself. We also get small and adorable footage of Benny, the 4-year-old, and then we get more footage of Alan saying how his daughter hates him, wants nothing to do with him, and blames him for her mother's death. And so we're starting to really get a glimpse into this family and how this loss in the family has really taken a toll on them. During a night of takeout, this is when things start to really get interesting as the phone rings and no one is there. The doorbell then rings and no one is there. Then back to the phone, then back to the door, and the camera work in these scenes are really good, and they feel action-packed and they really suspend you into the horror. And so it's like, as this is going on, you just get closer and closer, like you're really getting into this movie, and that's how I felt watching this. Just with how fast-paced the camera is and how it shakes a little, it truly is an immersive experience, in my opinion, when watching this movie. And then after all that happens, they are all surrounded by the sounds of glass breaking before realizing there wasn't any glass breaking at all. The phone rings once more before it gets smashed against the ground, telekinetically, I believe, and continues to ring while in pieces, which was kind of weird. Like, it was just on the floor in pieces, and it kept ringing as, like, it wasn't broken. As the team calms down, they start reviewing the data, where they find an image of a woman floating behind Caitlin in a camera still that they took earlier in the movie. And the question is, could it be the mother? that died. They wait until the next day only to find the image deleted, which if you watch YouTube videos from like TFIL, Sim and Colby, you know that this has happened a couple times in their investigations where some footage or audio gets deleted somehow. Meanwhile, during the night, the motion cam detects something and tracks it through the hallway, and this is where we start getting that paranormal activity vibe. And we see the motion sensors light up, and then we see the laptop light up, leading to the image to be deleted. And so that really, it really builds up the suspense of what this kind of is, and we kind of get more into that as we get deeper into the movie. In the morning, Alan and Caitlin get into an altercation about Caitlin being such a bitch, and they argue during breakfast as well. And I honestly just feel for little Benny, who has to witness all of this, because Alan and Caitlin, they just go back and forth as father and daughter, and then Benny has to witness it, and then Alan kind of accidentally, his impulses take it out on Benny a little, so it just kind of, you just kind of feel bad for the little kid. Paul brings some new equipment like head-mounted cameras and tries an experiment with strobe lights, which I will just say, caution here for anyone sensitive to strobe lights. And this is where the suspense starts to really get you invested in the payoff. It's just so satisfying as they quickly turn all the lights on after this experiment and start to panic as we get footage of their group standing in the middle of a room as a door swings open. And then Paul brings even more equipment to the apartment, and now Caitlin is more active in the investigation as well. Paul brings out a spirit box, which he calls something else, but I know it as a spirit box from watching Sam Colby and TFIL videos. Dr. Helzer starts asking questions, which they review later, but we can hear hisses and little sounds through the footage before Caitlin asks the entity who killed them, implying that her father might have killed her mother. As the group reviews the audio footage from the spirit box, they find nothing, but it's not long until strange things start happening again, as Ellen notices a breeze blowing a door open, and the wind is hard enough to make the curtains act as being blown back. And then suddenly the equipment starts going off as they all rush to the computers to see footage of Caitlin sleeping, live footage, and the motion sensor is picking up something in her room. As they watch the live footage, they notice something pulling Caitlin's shorts up, and Alan storms into her room and wakes her up abruptly, and they have yet another fight. We cut to footage of Helzer revealing to Alan that there is no ghost, but instead they're dealing with a poltergeist, and that this entity is not his late wife. Helzer explains how it's not supernatural, but just an unexplained phenomenon, and stresses that they are scientists, and that his family is dealing with poltergeist syndrome. It is usually associated with psychism of someone alive, and appears to people who are going through a lot of stress, subconscious rage, anxiety, guilt, and amounts of psychic energy. And the poltergeist channels it in extremely violent ways. And I really love this because they're starting to dive into the lore and depth of the rule set in this movie with this theory that Dr. Helzer has. We then get a surprise of the grandfather visiting, and Benny goes to stay with him until the investigation is over, which we don't see him again after this point. And it's also to see if he was also the cause of the poltergeist, and if he had any stress or grief. We anticlimactically cut to footage with the medium joining the investigation for a session. And I would just say, this movie does get pretty choppy all throughout. And there's just random cuts where you kind of want to giggle and laugh just because of how serious they try to make it, but it just feels so awkward and weird. And so the medium plans to enter another dimension through vibrations. At first, he starts shrieking out as he's in pain, but then Helzer starts asking questions while the entity speaks through the medium. But as he's asking, we don't get any answers coming through the medium. And then out of nowhere, the camera pans to Caitlin and she has all white eyes, her eyes roll back into her skull or something, as the entity chooses to speak through her instead, saying that it's not Caitlin when asked, and Alan asks if it was Cynthia, his dead wife, which results in him being pushed back by the entity with psychokinetic abilities. The entity tells everyone that it wasn't an accident, and Alan pleads that he didn't do anything, that he wasn't with Cynthia when she died, but the entity implies further that Alan has something to do with the death of his wife. Alan pleads more before the entity yells at him to shut up and starts throwing him against the wall and across the room repeatedly. And at this point, I'm just like, oh my god, this is he's just getting tossed around the room. and then after that, he gets through a glass door, and I'm not even gonna lie, I started bursting out laughing when he got thrown through the glass door, because I just can't take that seriously with how it looked like. And like I said, I'm on the edge of my seat as this is all going down, because I'm just really interested to find out what Alan actually did to Cynthia, and if he had something to do with her death. Like, did he kill her? Did he drive her to kill herself or something like that? But then we immediately cut to the whole group having breakfast the next morning. Complete silence. And I started bursting out laughing at the transition and how random it was. And the scene of them just eating breakfast goes on for like 45 seconds long before Ellen, the assistant, out of nowhere tries to spark conversation about what the poltergeist was talking about. And she's instantly being cut off by Helzer. And then at the same time Helzer cuts her off, Caitlin just pukes on her breakfast at the same time. And I just can't stop laughing at how serious they try to make this scene, because it's just so random, and the way it's executed is just pure comedy, and then the way it is handled is just so off. But we then cut to Ellen and Helzer talking while smoking, saying how they've ruled out a haunting and possession, and that Caitlin's psychism is responsible for the marks on her thighs, and that she's projecting the energy to accuse her father of something, to expose a secret. How she could have buried the memory out of guilt, shame, grief, and the secret is manifesting itself, and they ask each other whether Alan is possibly responsible for his wife's death. They quickly sit down for an interview with Alan. He pleads how Caitlin hates him before Helza explains she's grieving and a growing woman, and how he can't let this get to him, because it really seems like he doesn't really try to empathize or sympathize with his daughter at all. He asks Helza asks Alan to talk about and describe his wife as Cynthia. Alan praises her before talking about not being able to remember her face, and talks about how he's dealt with the pain and grief, which is actually some great material. Helzer asks when she stopped taking her meds, implying that Helzer has known more than he's led to know since the beginning of the movie. Alan explains how she wouldn't accept help from him. He talks about how he loved her before Helzer reveals he was seeking a divorce, and he has Alan's statement from the cops as evidence to prove that he was seeking a divorce. At this point, my jaw is just dropped, and the build-up to this explanation is paying off to a satisfying conclusion, and I'm just like, oh my god, wait. So this is like the twist that is revealed. And it is revealed that Cynthia was actually sick. Alan talks about how she was difficult to be around, and she was difficult to be with, as she was short-tempered, and that she used to scream at the kids. And at the same time, Helzer is trying to stop Alan from holding back, because I feel like he just has so much respect for his wife that he doesn't want to talk down on her, talk bad about her, because she's dead, and it just is always bad to talk down on the dead. And then out of just anger, grief, sadness, Alan yells out how Cynthia was cheating. Well, he said a different word, but I'm not taking down on YouTube. But it was revealed that Cynthia was cheating because she was staying in bed without bringing herself to clean herself, and would leave the house without a word or an explanation, saying how he had to miss work to look after the kids and lost his job, and his daughter blamed him for it. That her mom didn't want to come back because Alan didn't make her happy. Alan admits to letting Cynthia be sick and not helping her get better, but enabling her to get worse, and called her work to excuse her absence, that he also hid her sickness from the kids to protect, and she'd be sheltered in her room on the phone with someone else. So this is some great explanation and material for what happened, why there's so much hostility and adversity within this household, and the energy surrounding, and if you don't follow up on lore and that around poltergeists or spirits, they feed off of that negative energy, and so all that negative energy from the spirit could eventually turn into a poltergeist, and that's how that came to be, projecting it onto the spirit, and then that's how the spirit grew with more energy and became the ultimate poltergeist. Alan says how he asked her to take her medication, and she refused, so he finally threatened with getting custody of the kids. Alan then tells an incident when Caitlin went to find her mother, and she actually walked in on her mother and another guy. Alan got there a little bit after, and he saw everything as well. And Alan beat the guy, threw him out of the house, and lost control. He admits to hitting Cynthia once, and Caitlin witnessed it, telling him not to hurt her mother. Alan then took the kids and they drove around all night until the police found them, and he was told how Cynthia had wrapped her car around a tree, and Caitlin blamed him for her death. And so hearing that, that's like, we finally have an explanation of how she died and why Caitlin blames him. And he like says, I remember him saying in the movie how, in his monologue, how he didn't want the kids to see him like that. He wished they didn't see him be like that. And then Hauser asks Alan if anyone's examined Caitlin, only for him to follow up with that Caitlin has the onset of schizophrenia, and it is the same condition that Cynthia, her mother, struggled with. And that's when we get the reveal of what's up with Cynthia, what's up with Caitlin, and why they were the way that they were. They were struggling with schizophrenia, which clearly Alan was aware of. He had to be, because she was taking medication for it. Maybe he just wasn't in the right position, or he wasn't the right person to be able to take care of someone like that. Maybe that's why things happened the way that they did. Because there's no way he didn't know that it was schizophrenia. He had to know if he was the husband of Cynthia. I can't imagine her hiding that from Alan. The group are interrupted with the sounds of breaking glass, and the camera pans to an image of Caitlin standing in the doorframe with white eyes and screeching, and Hauser is thrown across the room. And this is one of the jump scares that happened that kind of got me, because it was just so unexpected, and you're just so into this monologue and you're focused on the screen, and then out of nowhere you just get jump scared by Caitlin screeching, or an image of her, I mean. And it's just because of how unexpected it was. Turns out it was actually the poltergeist projecting an image of Caitlin. And as they look at the monitor and see Caitlin asleep in bed, the poltergeist starts mimicking the screeching and voice of Caitlin. Furniture starts magnetizing to the doors and exits as Alan tries to run to Caitlin's room. Caitlin starts shaking in bed like Reagan did in The Exorcist, but the way it happens here is so cheesy. It's just not believable at all. She then sits up and stares at the camera creepily. Again, the camera work in these scenes is actually amazing as they move to make it into Caitlin's room, and you just see it shaking, and like it's really immersive with like the camera work in this movie. I think that's one of the best things with this movie is how they work the camera and make you feel immersed into this, and grabs you and makes you feel locked into the movie. But yeah, they hear her screaming for help. There is a huge gust of wind that blows through the hallways as they all try and get to the room that Caitlin's in, and they just keep being blown back. They have to try to push their way through the gust of wind, and it's only a matter of time until the ceiling starts to crack from the force of the wind, and the whole apartment starts to shake, and windows and walls start to break down, almost like an earthquake. Hauser and Alan break the door down before seeing Caitlin float mid-air as Alan tries reaching for her hand, and once he gets a hold on her, he pulls it down. So like there's this big moment where it's like there's like a tornado like around her as she's floating in the middle of it, and so they all try to get in the room and they try to pull her down, and once they finally get a hold on her and pull her down, she falls onto her bed. Paramedics arrive, and Alan and Caitlin leave to the hospital as Hauser, he reveals that he knew what this case was as he walked through the door at the beginning, but wanted to prove that they were actually scientists and that they could actually solve what this is. Paul and Hauser leave for a last and final sheep attempt at a jump scare, even worse than the Paranormal Activity before the credits roll. So yeah, after they leave, there's like a good solid few seconds of just staring into this empty apartment, and then on the ceiling, a girl, I guess the image of Caitlin just crawls up to the screen as like a final jump scare, which it didn't get me. Overall, I didn't expect much from this movie, but I ended up having fun and getting some great suspense out of it and some great storytelling as well. Like, I believe the Rotten Tomatoes score is like 13 or something like that. It's really low, and I was actually surprised at how low it really was. So this is just a start of me reviewing these horror movies and really talking about them. And I'm really excited to get more into like these lower, more niche horror movies, and letting y'all know how, like, getting them onto your radar so that you can check them out yourselves. Overall, I didn't expect much from this movie, but I ended up having fun and getting some great suspense out of it and some great storytelling as well. The explanations for why things were happening were different, and I loved the hypothesis that was explained in the story. There were things like the dialogue, some cheap moments, and I felt the lack of setting as they were just stuck in like the one apartment. It feels like as almost all the scenes take place, and I just felt like that was a downside. But there's an amazing dialogue from Kai Lennox, and it's definitely a movie I can see being a cult classic. So with all that being said, I give Apartment 143 a B minus. So yeah, it's not like the best movie, it's not the worst, but it's like right in the middle to where you'll have fun with it, you'll get some great suspense out of it, and you really feel like the horror, paranormal element from it. And yeah, like the writing isn't amazing. The story is well developed in my opinion, well enough to like keep you like glued to the movie, to the screen. But yeah, that's my review of Apartment 143. Let me know what you thought about this movie down below, and let me know if you're interested in seeing this movie yourselves. Hope you did enjoy it. If you did, please drop a like. Subscribe if you are new, and join the Grimpire. I plan to post a lot more horror reviews in the future, and maybe some horror movie rankings as well. And don't forget to turn post notifications on to get notified when I do post some more great horror content. But yeah, all my socials are down in the description below. I have a Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and I also have my gaming channel down there as well, where I plan to do more like horror games and stuff like that. But yeah, hope y'all did enjoy, and I'll see y'all next time.